has a straight edge on it, so it's very easy. And maybe in our world here, there lives a happy little mountain.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin and I upload a whole bunch of different types of videos on this channel, usually surrounding true crime, mystery, psychological experiments, anything along those lines really. So today I'm back discussing another unsolved case, and this one is a UK based case because I know a lot of you guys want to hear a little bit more about UK crimes, which are usually harder to research and there's a lot less of them, but I'm bringing one to you today. So today we're going to be discussing the unsolved disappearance of a 16-year-old boy named Kevin Hicks. So if you want to hear a little bit about his story, then keep on watching and we shall just get started. So Kevin Hicks, like I said, was a 16-year-old boy. He was from South Croydon in London and he disappeared in the year 1986. On March 2nd, 1986, Kevin left his home after telling his parents that he was going to the local supermarket. It was just down the road. He was going to pick up some eggs for his food tech exam the next day in school. So he left pretty late at night. He left at around 8:30 p.m. and he left with less than £1 in change. He just went on this 2-minute or supposedly 2-minute journey, and unfortunately he never came home. The shop that his parents were under the impression that he was going to that evening was only a road or two away from the road that they lived on. It literally should have only taken him a couple minutes there and then a couple minutes back. So they were expecting him home maybe 10 minutes after he left. Obviously when he didn't come home, his parents became worried and they very quickly reported him as missing. When police began their investigation into what could have happened to Kevin that night, they found that the shop that Kevin was supposed to be going to that night, none of the CCTV cameras were working around the perimeter, so they had no idea whether he actually even made it to the shop or not. And also they interviewed the workers who had been inside the shop that night and none of them recalled ever seeing Kevin. So that means in all likelihood he didn't make it to that shop that evening. There was a witness who came forward not long into the investigation who did already know Kevin, so he recognised him. They said that they'd seen him at around 10 p.m. walking towards his home. So obviously this in itself is quite strange because like I said, he left at 8:30 and for him to be seen walking around at 10 p.m. it was very, very unusual. And this unfortunately was the last sighting of Kevin. The road that this witness saw Kevin walking down was a road called Shirley Road, and when police sort of mapped out any potential routes to and from his house around the impression that he was going to the shop, the Shirley Road route there was no logical route there. It didn't make sense for him to be down there in the journey that they were under the impression that he was making. This, linked with the knowledge that he was seen an hour and a half after he'd left, begs the question of whether Kevin actually did intend on going to the shop that night or whether he had actually gone somewhere else and just lied to his parents. Or the other potential theory is that he had intended to go to the shop that night, potentially got distracted by something and it made him kind of take a detour longer than he expected, and then he encountered some trouble on his way home. So because, as you can imagine, it kind of just appeared in this initial investigation that Kevin kind of just vanished into thin air, investigators had no leads whatsoever. There was nothing they had at all to even start their investigation. So nothing new came forward until around 10 years later. On October 25th, 1996, the Croydon Advertiser newspaper received an anonymous phone call. The caller was claiming that they knew where Kevin was buried, what happened to him that night, but before they could trace it or anything or find out who it was, the call ended. So that is pretty much all of the information on Kevin's actual case. So now I do have a lot of theories, potential scenarios that may have happened. As sort of listed by police, there, like I said, there just wasn't any evidence and it kind of just seems like he did just vanish. So I'm going to go through each of the potential theories or possible scenarios, what could have potentially happened to him that night. And let me know down below what your thoughts are. This isn't a very long video, but it's kind of still worth a discussion because, like I said, there is no idea of what happened to him. So the first theory that does usually have to be considered in these sort of disappearance cases is the potential scenario in which Kevin killed himself. So there were no known factors as to why Kevin could have potentially killed himself, very similar to the theory I discussed about the possible scenario of whether he ran away. His parents were under the impression there was nothing wrong at school, he had good friends, there was nothing wrong at home, so they didn't believe that there was any reason for him to commit suicide. But like I said, it is something that does usually have to be considered in these sort of scenarios. But the main sort of argument against this is it is extremely unlikely that, however Kevin had committed suicide, it's extremely unlikely that his body would never have been found by now, these many years later. So yeah, that isn't particularly credible, but like I said, it needs to be considered. The second possible scenario is that Kevin disappeared of his own accord. Like the suicide scenario, it is very unlikely his parents weren't aware of anything wrong, any reason why he would need to run away, and also it is so unlikely for a 16-year-old to disappear on his own and stay hidden for 30 odd years. So again, this isn't the most likely, but still is worth considering. The next possible scenario is that on that night Kevin had some sort of accident, he was involved in an accident and died as a result. The evening that Kevin went missing, it was particularly dark, obviously it was late at night, and it is very possible that maybe he encountered an accident with a third party or another party, so maybe he was hit by a car or something. That is very likely, and it does happen, and perhaps whoever was involved in this accident panicked and got rid of him. And then the biggest theory follows the lines of Kevin being murdered. So in 2016, when the investigators reopened this case, they sort of re-examined it, they decided that there was no sort of definitive evidence to suggest that he was murdered, but it is the most likely scenario in their eyes. The anonymous phone call that was made to the newspaper some years before does suggest that there would be another party involved. Whether or not that was a hoax, it does seem more and more likely that at least one other person was involved in whatever had happened to Kevin that night, because like I said, it was very unlikely that if he disappeared or if he died on his own, very unlikely that he wouldn't have been found by now. So a very likely and quite a popular theory that was offered up by police investigators follows along the lines of Kevin potentially being groomed for quite some time before his disappearance, and that in reality he had actually gone out that night to meet this person that he'd been talking to and had been grooming him, and unfortunately died as a result. There were small things that when they sort of examined this potential theory, they found that does point towards potential grooming behaviours. So for example, when they asked his parents, there was an incident where Kevin was seen wearing brand new trainers, like expensive trainers, and when his parents had asked about them, he'd tried really hard to hide them, to lie about them. So one of the main sort of grooming behaviours is for the groomers to provide their victims with kind of expensive, luxury, lavish gifts in order to gain their trust. So if this theory is followed, it would suggest that he had lied to his parents that night about going to the shop, just thinking that he was going to meet this person that he was seemingly friends with, and then during his meeting with this person, potentially he was abducted intentionally, unintentionally, or killed intentionally or unintentionally. I do personally think this is a rather likely scenario. Like I said, there isn't any sort of definitive evidence to suggest that this is true, but like I said, it is very unlikely that if he had disappeared or had killed himself that he wouldn't have been found by now. So I think it is extremely likely that there is another party involved in whatever happened to Kevin that night. Sadly, both Kevin's parents have died, not knowing any answers about what had happened to their son, and his only remaining family member is his sister. Kevin's sister Alex continues to fight for answers, and in 2017 she made another appeal trying to find any information, trying to reopen the case, because she's determined to find out what had happened to her brother. There is also a £20,000 reward for anyone who can offer any information about what happened to Kevin that night in 1986, as well as the anonymous caller from 1996 to come forward, even if it was just a hoax. They just want to know sort of if this was true, if this was a potential lead they can follow, so they are looking to this day still for information. So that is everything I'm going to discuss today. I know it's not the longest video, but like I said, it's still worth discussing, so let me know down below which of these theories you think is most likely, or if there's your own theory that you have, then feel free to let me know. Don't forget to follow me on all of my social medias. You can drop me a DM if you want to ask me anything. If you have a request, feel free to contact me on any of there, and I will see you guys soon for another video. Bye.